Hi, I'm Samia, host of the Diverse Bookshelf podcast. Keep listening to the Voice It Out podcast.
Hi, it's Amrita, and I'm back with another great episode, even though I do say so myself, of the Voice It Out podcast. Welcome once again. And today I am talking to a fellow podcaster, and I'm really excited to have her on. And she basically runs the podcast called The Diverse Bookshelf, and specifically looks at books, communities, and authors from underrepresented communities. It's Samia Aziz. Hello, Samia.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on your show.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. A bit confused by the weather these days, but doing well.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
That's the joy of staying in the UK, isn't it, really? But thank you so much for coming. And I'm excited because you are the first fellow podcaster that we have. And I'm really intrigued by your podcast because you've been running for, I think, a year longer than we have. So around 3 years. And I've got to say, you are award winning. So congratulations for that.
Thank you.
How did you first get started with the podcast? And what do you think kind of made you do a podcast on these kind of subjects?
Yeah, I think, with social media and YouTube, there's so much different types of content out there. And I think especially with social media, sort of Instagram Reels and TikTok, a lot of it is short, snappy, fun, engaging. And I think what I felt was really missing was getting those sort of deep, longer conversations. And so the podcast format seemed the most suited to what I wanted to do. And also I've been using Instagram to talk about books for maybe 5 years now. And I had just really felt like I wanted to engage with authors a little bit more and get out some of those hidden experiences and stories and be able to talk about the books that don't get enough attention. And I just went for it, really. We've been talking today a little bit about just winging it.
Yeah.
And that sort of, I had no experience in podcasting before. I'd never done any sort of recording or editing. I didn't know really what it entailed. I just took it one step at a time, a lot of trial and error. And and here we are 3 years later almost.
Did you think that you would, did you kind of have a direction? Did you think that you would want to go long term in a way? Because, you get certain podcasts that not fade away, but in a way sort of, when people get going, sometimes you realise that this is not the journey you kind of want to be on when you're actually there. So did you think that you'd even get to this point?
Well, I'm really surprised. Pleasantly surprised, but I'm really surprised because I don't have a great track record of being consistent with anything. So I wasn't sure. But also I do know, I think especially in lockdown, a lot of people started podcasts. And I think the statistics are something 70% or something don't make it past 8 episodes. So, it felt quite daunting initially. So I was just look, just take it one episode at a time, one conversation at a time, and just sort of, see where you go. I think I didn't think that I would enjoy it as much as I have done. And I am just so amazed at what the last 3 years have been like for me in terms of the guests I've been able to speak to, the conversations that we've been able to have. And it's been amazing, but surprising. Yeah.
That's really good because I feel like it's really important to have something that constantly surprises you and that you're passionate about. And if the two go together, you're pretty much on the right track, right? Yeah. So I've got to ask you, because I've just said that obviously your focus is on books that are from underrepresented communities or talk about or authors that are, or, it's quite a wide subject, but also it's quite niche as well at the same time. Yeah. What made you want to kind of focus on that particularly? So
generally with books and the publishing industry, and especially book selling, I just have a huge bugbear in that we tend to get a lot of authors from, a very similar kind of background that get a lot of the attention. Often it's white authors that have been around for a long time, or maybe not even been around for a long time. And they get a lot of the attention and a lot of the focus. But actually there are hundreds, if not thousands of books being published every week in the UK. And within that, there's so many amazing authors, some of them published by small or independent presses, but some also by the larger ones. And they just don't get that space. They don't get that opportunity to showcase their work and to talk about their books. And I wanted to help change that somewhat. But also, I think speaking to these authors, so much of what they have to say about their writing, but also where their writing fits into the world, where it fits into questions about belonging and identity and current affairs. And I really wanted to be able to bring that out a little bit. And so, yeah, that's sort of what I try to do.
I think you definitely achieve that in your podcast. I think the in-depth conversations and the kind of themes that you bring into it. And I know, obviously, you are a bookworm. Obviously, she wouldn't have a book podcast if she wasn't. But yeah, you obviously are a bookworm, so you've got a natural interest in books, right? So I think that definitely comes across when you're asking your kind of authors about what they've written, kind of the background of it, and you know why they've written in the way that they've written. But in terms of your own self, what kind of books or what kind of stories are you personally drawn to, or if there are any?
Yeah, so I think I'm a kind of reader that looks for myself in books.
Okay.
And so I really like stories that are based on like families, especially if they've got like an intergenerational element. So I love reading about, you could have like a granddaughter in a story. You're reading her story, but you're also reading what happened 2 generations before or even further. I really, really like those stories. I think I think they're so rich, and I find it so relatable often as well. I'm quite interested in historical fiction, and I think for so long the idea of historical fiction has been like, oh, these are just books written about World War One, and they're kind of boring, and we don't really want to just be reading diary entries from soldiers on the front line. But actually, history is massive, right? Like when we think about everything that's happened around the world. And to be able to learn about that, and to be able to learn about it in a way that is person-centric. And I've learned about so many things I didn't even know happened all over the world, in places like Cyprus and Vietnam and Korea, but also in I've read a lot about the partition of India, and that's been really amazing. And so those are probably the 2 things that I like the most.
Do you think that you are drawn to that? Because you said you tried to find yourself. Do you ever think of maybe one book or one story even that you have read, you think this is totally me? Like, I know that's a hard question, but I just thought to give kind of context of the kind of stuff that you've said, and also the layers that you kind of, well, not you, but I guess if it is an intergenerational story, there are going to be layers, like you said, because you are looking like a few generations behind and how that person wants to fit in today, but also kind of respect or maybe look back and kind of maybe feel happy or proud of where they've come from. So do you think there is one character that you really, really identify with and that hasn't shifted?
I think I've read lots of books over time that I feel really that I can really relate to. I think something fairly recently, there's an author, she's British Pakistani, she lives in Bradford, her name is Sarish Hussain, and her most recent book is called Hidden Fires. And it's a story of a teenage girl who's, her father's Pakistani, her mother, I think in the book is Spanish or Italian, I can't remember, but she's somewhere from Europe, and she has this mixed race identity, and she's trying to navigate it. And it is also taking place at the time of the Grenfell fire. And she ends up in a scenario where she's living with her grandfather for a few weeks, just the 2 of them. And throughout the novel, not only do we see her sort of struggling with her identity and her being a teenager and struggling with all the things associated with that, we also explore her grandfather's story. He's developing dementia, and his past is haunting him, and his story of partition and escaping partition and the things that he witnessed. I think that felt to me so big because there were so many elements of that grandfather character that I felt like the elders in my family or my community, I could really see that. And also, I was a teenager a long time ago, but the struggles that you experience when you're young and you're growing up, I think that was also just really nice to read, because I think when I was that age, there weren't books that I felt that were particularly relevant to me. They didn't mirror my experiences. And so it's really nice that that's available now.
That's really interesting, especially because you said, obviously, you're kind of in the middle, I guess, from the grandfather's generation and from the girl that was a teenager.
Yeah.
But I was going to ask you, on a personal level, when you are reading stories or when you are coming across this kind of cross-generational story, have you ever found it difficult to not see yourself in it, but kind of identify with it? The reason I ask this is because you've just said, obviously, in that particular story, you get the grandfather's view as well and the struggle that he's gone through with partition. But sometimes I feel like in our generation, it's not very easy to understand that day to day of our elders, or even just generally people who are of an older generation.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's, I'm being very specific, but it's a general question. Do you think it's helped open your eyes a little bit to that kind of struggle and why they are the way they are now? Because I think sometimes our generation might struggle with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually it has to be on your part a little bit of a conscious effort. You have to be willing to engage with that. And you have to look for the information. It's not readily available. I mean, when we were growing up, it wasn't something that was taught as part of the curriculum. What happened in pre-partition India and with the partition, it wasn't taught to us. It was only something that I learned about way later because I wanted to and I felt like I needed to. But absolutely, I think the more we learn about it, the more we understand. I think we're able to understand where the guardedness of that generation comes from, where that anxiety that they have and the stress and how often they're not the most friendly people to be around. And, I think that is putting a little bit of softness, I think, in my heart towards them and being able to understand that until we understand a person's past, we can never really understand who they are today. And instead of being judgmental and instead of feeling, I often feel like a personal attack when an older in my community is rude to me or when they've said something that I find offensive. It's actually got nothing to do with me. It's so much based on everything that they've experienced and how they now see the world as a result of that, and it's just manifesting. It's not got to do with me at all. And so finding that sort of grace as well, I think, because I hear increasing numbers of stories of young people feeling like they can't relate to the older generation, and sometimes it leads to people distancing themselves from their families or their communities. And when I hear that, I just feel so sad. I feel like this is a huge loss for you as a person to be ostracized or having removed yourself from your community. And maybe if we had more of these stories available when we were younger and over a longer period of time, maybe that sort of, that forgiveness and that understanding, and it would work both ways, I think would have been there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like in terms of just representation, not even just in books, but even if you look at like web series or films or something like that, I think we are getting to a point where I can actually think to myself that the younger generation actually have not role models so much, but they have representation where they can see, oh, that person looks like me.
Yeah.
And they're in a mainstream show kind of thing. Yeah. And I think that is a really big thing that I didn't have when I was younger either. And I feel like it has kind of shaped the way that I want to kind of show other people's stories. And in a really weird way, I don't want to show people under one umbrella. I want to show that people are different, even in the British Asian, in a very wide British Asian kind of spectrum. People are different. People have been through different experiences, some bad, some good. But also, I think to look at the lens of like where we are today, because when we're not in a great place today. I feel like the world is very problematic at the moment for various reasons around the world. But at the same time, I think what you've just said is so important, because just to not judge. And I think in younger generations, I think that's really difficult, especially with social media and with, the stuff that they see or they experience in their peers or whatever it might be. But as, I don't know whether have you grown up in the UK?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask you actually, do you think the same as me, do you think that the representation in the media or in books is so much better to the point where we are seeing diverse stories and we are able to kind of look at different kind of stories to ourselves and still identify? Do you think that's important, and do you think that is happening now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is massively important, because I think for so long, and it still happens today as well, society or whatever it is forcing people into boxes. And it's so harmful to do that, because what you're saying is that, you know, as a British Asian woman, you fit into this box, and this means that you are only X, Y, and Z certain type of character, and you're most likely to do A, B, and C career, and these are the things that matter to you, and da-da. And obviously, like, it gets even worse for certain groups as well. Like, as a British Muslim woman, the box that I'm often put in is like, okay, you're a British Muslim woman. That means that, you know, you are submissive, and maybe you're fanatic about your religion, and, you know, all of the things that can actually end up being really harmful on a bigger scale, in terms of institutional racism and all of that. And it's really important to remember that there is no one type of person. Like, there is no one type of British Asian woman or British Asian person in general.
Absolutely not.
There are so many experiences, and it's so nice, I think, that those experiences are coming forward. And, you know, it's really nice for me to watch stories, or to read stories, or to watch things on TV about British Asians from a completely different experience than me, right? Doing completely different things. I always find it so fun to just see the way that different people are living their lives. I think there does come a little bit of a sticking point, which is, you know, is representation or presentation of one group harmful to another? And I think that's where things become a little bit of a grey area, and we have to be really considerate and sensitive about how we're talking about that. Like, for example, if you're talking about, for example, like, I wear the hijab. So if we're talking about Muslim women that don't wear the hijab, great for them, great choice, completely your choice, living your life the way that you want to live. But is that representation somehow, because of the way that it's presented, not the fact that it is, but the way that it's presented, is it belittling my lived experience? Is it making me to look stupid because I am wearing the hijab? You know, I think these are the things that need to be taken into consideration. But absolutely, like, I think it's so important that it means that a lot more people are able to find something that they can really strongly relate to, and not just sort of grab hold of anything. Because I think for so long it was like, oh, there's this brown person on screen. Even if they're completely different to you, that was the only thing that you could hold on to. Whereas like now, because there's so much, you can find at least something or more things that feel more relatable to you, even if there are lots of other things that are not.
Yeah, that's so true. When I was listening to you talking about that, actually, it reminded me of Goodness Gracious Me.
Yeah. Because
obviously, to look back from today's eyes at that show, it's very problematic.
Yes.
But back then, like you said, we would hold on to that because, oh my God, it's a group of Asians on mainstream TV, you know, in a comedy sketch. It's just like, wow, that's amazing. But now, obviously, we have a lot of problems with that. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, actually, because obviously when the recent riots went on, I know that when I was kind of going out and about or seeing stuff on social media, I think there was a big thing on social media about those riots, I felt awful because I felt like Britain had not overcome so much, like completely, but had got to a stage where we can accept wholly that everyone is different, all communities are different. And yes, there are going to be certain people that you find that who are, I wouldn't like to say racist, but maybe just a little bit ignorant, I guess, and might brush everyone and under the same umbrella, or just feel like you said, if they see a woman in a scarf, they think that that's a certain representation and that every British woman, every British Muslim woman is the same, even if they're wearing the scarf or not. And I felt a real kind of, in those weeks, I felt a real loss of identity. Yeah. And it's difficult to explain now, because the feeling that it was then, it was difficult to explain even then. Yeah. But I think a lot of people in the British Asian community felt as if, hold on, this is our home. But is it our home? Because obviously it turned into a race argument, in inverted commas. And it took a while for people to come out and be like, no, this is not the UK that we are. I just wanted to ask you, because of the representation that people might look at you and just imagine, how did you feel at that time? Because I would expect that you felt similar, but in a way you might have felt worse. That's basically what I wanted to ask you. How did it feel?
Yeah, I mean, it was awful. Yeah. It was terrible. And I think for me, I was reminded really heavily of the post 9/11 period. And I was really young at that point. So my experience was I was very sheltered. I wasn't somebody that was going out to work. I wasn't, I was living with my parents. I think I was like 10 or something. I was really young. But I do know in everything that followed, sort of in the country, but then also how that could then lead to the justification of wars and other things going on. I was really reminded of that period, and it felt really scary to be me. And not just that I was worried about walking out of my house. I was worried about whether or not, like you said, like whether or not people actually were comfortable with me being in this country. And it felt like it felt, because they seem to come out of nowhere almost. So it felt like your sort of acceptance or your tolerance is so fragile that it's taken this one thing for it to completely break. Yeah. And for something so terrible to happen as a result. And I know it didn't just come out of nowhere. But I also think that, we've been talking about the representation, especially of partition. And this is what I think, I have lived I was born in the UK, and I love this country in so many ways, but I cannot turn a blind eye to its colonial past, right? And the reason why we're here in this country and the reason why our families came is because of what Britain did in India, but also the fact that then after the Second World War, when it needed people to rebuild the country and it needed labor, it invited us over. We didn't come to take over. It invited us over to come and work. And our families and our communities have been working here, and we are still working here. It's not changed. And I just think if people really understood that, we wouldn't have this like, oh, do we belong here or do we not belong here? There is a reason why we are here.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not here because we think England is the most beautiful country in the world. Like, we're not chasing the English countryside as the perfect view, right? That's not why we're here. There's this whole sort of complex web of things that have happened over time and still happening today, that actually, if people understood it, they would realize that, actually, we've historically needed these people, and we've taken advantage of them, and we've pillaged their lands, and we've killed their people and stolen things from their lands. But still, these people are here living among us, working for us, going to any hospital, and you're most likely to be seen by a person of colour.
So true. So that is the representation we have in the TV as well. I always think, how come the doctors are always Asian? Because of this reason. There are a lot of British Asians working in, public sector jobs. In any other jobs as well, but mostly public sector jobs. We're, essentials, basically.
Absolutely.
So I thank you for, sharing how you felt during that time. I think it's really important to understand that even though it did get sparked by the awful things that happened in Southport, it didn't continue because of that reason. And social media had a lot to do with blowing it up. And it was, you're right, it was very scary. Yeah. And I think it's scarier for people like us who have grown up here. Yeah. And it is our home. No matter, there's no other way of looking at it. It is our home. And I think it's scarier for us than it would be for my parents, for example, because my parents came kind of midlife. But yeah, it was a really scary time. But I hope that it kind of, when it culminated, it was really nice to see people go out and support the diversity that we have in this country, and it was more than a sigh of relief.
Yeah,
I think. Would you say that?
Yeah, it was.
It was nice.
Yeah, I mean, it was. It was also quite. It was quite funny in the sense that there was the counter protests were bigger than the protests that were actually happening, which was great to see.
Yeah.
But I think what did make me laugh a little bit was that, there were a lot of people that were reaching out and were being really very public about their support. And people were saying like, oh, I really hope that, the people that we know and that we love, and I hope they realize that this is just the actions of a few people. And as a Muslim, to me, that felt really wild that I was hearing that, because this is something I personally have been saying for decades now, which is like, if a Muslim or a person who tells you that they're Muslim does something bad, it's one person. You're now branding all of us with the same brush. And it was exactly the same thing, but reversed.
It's true. That vice versa. There's only a few people who think that. So true. I so didn't think of it like that. It's really random. I wanted to ask you, actually, in terms of mental health, which we have as an underlying theme on the podcast, you as a podcaster have just explained that you didn't have any history of, interviewing or anything like that. You said it was initially daunting, but how did you keep yourself motivated, even when it felt daunting, but also even now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, but really difficult topic, because I think podcasting, maybe you have a similar experience. In some ways, it can feel, I guess, any form of creativity or creation feels like this. It can sometimes feel like you're putting so much effort into work, you're producing these amazing things, they're going out into the world, and people are listening, but that's kind of it. And in some ways it feels a little bit thankless, and I'm not suggesting that we should be thanked constantly for our work, but it can feel just a little bit one-sided. I think that's probably the best way to put it. And that's difficult. I think that's really difficult to be in a position. And I'm sure there's lots of other things that people do. And I would assume like motherhood can often feel like that as well. Like there's so many different things that feel so one-sided. And I think as well, it can be quite lonely and isolating working on a podcast. Even like there's two of you doing it, but even then it's just the two of you, right? And your guests who come in and out, but it's just the two of you. And for me, it's just me, and I'm constantly like chewing off my husband's ear, and I'm like asking friends for advice because I don't have a massive team. Yeah. And so it can be really difficult to keep yourself motivated and to sort of not be overwhelmed by it. But I think that the best thing to do is just to take it one step at a time. Like when I started the podcast, I didn't have a plan. I just thought that I was going to give it a go. And if it worked, then great. And if it didn't, then, that's okay. I haven't lost a huge amount. And that's why I also think like, be smart when you start as well. Understand your time constraints, understand your finances, because you can't start a podcast for free. There has to be some investment. Yeah. So be smart about it, and maybe think like, okay, for now I'm going to spend X amount of money. If it works in a year's time, I can up it and I can change my setup and I can do all of that kind of stuff. But be smart about it. Kind of see it as like a test, and then sort of just take it step by step and day by day, and not overcommit. Because I think when people, you start with like full intentions of like, I'm going to produce an episode every twice a week, let's say, although I don't know who is doing twice a week episodes, but we are going to produce an episode twice a week. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to get it out. It's going to be audio and video, and I'm going to get it out everywhere. I'm going to have all these like spin-off reels for Instagram. Oh my gosh. You might be able to manage one episode like that, but you will very quickly burn out. So take it slow and sort of build on that. And I think for me, that's been really good. That's been really helpful, just to take it one step at a time. And also, if something happens and you can't honor a commitment that you made, you have to cancel a recording or you have to take a little bit of a break, that's okay. The world's not going to end. No one's going to, shout at you for doing that. You're not going to get into trouble or be penalized. Just take any time that you need to do whatever it is that you need to do, and just sort of, just stay. I think if you're enjoying it, that's always it's a good sign. If you get to the point where you're not enjoying it and you're also feeling overwhelmed and daunted by it, then something has to change. Then it's something about either what you're doing or how you're doing it or who you're speaking to. There's something about it that's not working. And it's important to take the time to stop and understand that, and then to be able to make the change.
That's really good advice. I think I'm going to take some of that. I was going to say, actually, because I think for our podcast, we went from weekly. So we went from once every 2 weeks to then weekly to now back to once every 2 weeks. And I think that's because our setup changed in the middle. But at the same time, I think for me personally, podcasting I've always wanted a podcast, for one. Let's just get that straight. But I think for me, it's been about having important conversations. Yep. And I think what you said about it being thankless in inverted commas is exactly how it feels a lot of the time. But you do get the odd person or the odd audience member or listener saying, oh my God, I really liked that, that part of your podcast or what you spoke about here. And we've had that so often. And you sort of just think, people are listening. Yeah. It's not just me just sitting here talking to someone. And I think those kind of light bulb moments are really good in terms of, because the reason I say that is because not a lot of people give feedback in that sense. And I think even loved ones or friends or family, I think they appreciate what you're putting into it, but don't always tell you that. And I think it's really difficult to feel motivated in those kind of times when you don't hear it, because just validation wise, sometimes you do, like you said, you literally do feel like you're putting so much work in, and what is actually happening to that. So I think it's really important to kind of grab those moments and cherish those moments as well. But at the same time, in order to keep motivated, I think you are absolutely right in terms of it's okay to take a break. It's okay to reevaluate whenever you feel like you need to. And the most important thing, as you say, is if you enjoy it, that's the main thing. And also if it's breaking the bank.
Exactly.
You might have to revisit that as well. Unless you want to buy a lottery ticket.
Because you're right in the sense that people in general are we're really good at complaining about things. We're so good at saying we don't like this thing, or your service is too rubbish, or and we're not good at just sort of saying, actually, that was amazing. Thank you so much. That was so great. But you're right, it makes such a difference. And I do get listeners reach out to me, especially, and I really like it when it's somebody new or somebody that I haven't interacted with before, because then I think it's finding the podcast is finding its listeners. And it means so much, because that's what we hope. We hope that the conversations that we're putting out there are helping people in some ways, or they're inspiring them, or they're making them feel seen. And when somebody tells you that, you're just like, yes, I'm so glad that I'm doing the thing that I want to be doing.
And I think it makes it even more special when sometimes when you've made a change or you've done something different and someone notices, because like you say, you're by yourself. I've obviously got one other person, Shama, but mine and Shama's kind of positions in the podcast have changed. So it's still been a bit of a journey for us, but at the same time, it is just us two. So sometimes I think it's one of those things where if we need someone else's kind of opinion or whatever it is, it's quite difficult to find someone who will be on that same level and who has understood where we've, kind of made that journey so far. So I totally understand that. So aside from the podcast, I just wanted to ask you, is there anything that you particularly do to improve your mental health, or kind of, how should I say it? Prioritize yourself. That's a good way of saying it.
So, it's funny you should ask, actually, because since last summer, I just got to a point where I was like, oh my gosh, I am so overwhelmed. I had all of this stuff going on in my personal life, and I felt like my work wasn't working, and my work wasn't working. I felt like my work wasn't going that well. And then obviously I was working on the podcast, but I was feeling a little bit disillusioned. I just felt like, oh my gosh, everything is it's closing in, and this doesn't feel good. And so I decided to start taking a bit of time every day to get myself outside, to just start walking. And I I really appreciated it because like it's helped me, unintentionally, because I didn't intend for it to happen, but it sparked like a whole fitness and weight loss journey for me since then. It's been amazing. But now regardless of anything else that I'm doing with regards to that, I make sure that I'm walking, because I think being outside, whether you're walking by yourself or with other people, just taking a break from your environment, just getting outside where you're breathing in the fresh air. I know there's lots of pollution, but still, like breathing in the fresh air, it helps if you can be somewhere green.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that really, really helps. I think that's a great way to look after your mental health, because it gives you, I think, the space also to really think about what else it is that you need. And I don't think that a walk solves your problems by any means, but I think it gives you some clarity.
Definitely.
And so many times I've come back from my walk and I've been like, right, this is what I need to do. Yeah. And it might just be, I need to phone a friend, or I need to sleep, or I need to eat something nutritious, or I need to eat some chocolate. Like, it gives me that clarity. And so I think that is definitely something that I do. And then the other thing is that I think I've just become a little bit better at saying no, or saying, no, thank you right now, or I can't do that. And whether that's in my personal life or whether that's in work or something else, just to, because I think I've been like a yes person for so long, and I have such a people-pleasing tendency that you can just end up doing things that you don't want to do, that are really draining, that are really, really difficult. And you're doing it with a smile because you don't want to upset anybody. And I've just become a little bit better at saying, you know what, I'm really sorry, I can't show up for this right now.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm not the best person for that. I don't think I have the right skills for that, or no, I'm just too tired. I've got too much on. Yeah. And that's a still work in progress, but I have tried to do that a little bit more, and I think that's definitely helping.
So it's really funny that you say that, because setting boundaries, I think, is really important, but I think we as women struggle with it. But I think in the British Asian culture, we struggle with it even more because we are people pleasers and we don't want to, like you say, ruffle any feathers or kind of just bring any negativity into it, I guess. I wanted to ask you, when you first started doing that, when you first started setting the boundary, like you said, it is a work in progress. I feel like that is not you in a way, from what I know of you. How difficult did you find it initially to say no and not feel negative about it?
Yeah, I mean, I had to do it. It felt a bit of trial and error. And so I only felt comfortable to do it with people that I really, really trusted. Yeah. So it was where I felt very safe. So I would only start saying it like to my husband or to my best friend. And I would say it very softly and very gently. And once I realized that it was fine, I realized that I could say it to more and more people. It's incredibly uncomfortable. It does not feel nice. It does not feel good. Because also, if we think about mental health, sometimes showing up in that way or people pleasing, sometimes if it keeps you feeling stable, you kind of feel like you have to keep going with it. But yeah, I think it takes time. It does. And you have to, I think that was a good way to do it, to just start with the people that I know couldn't disown me for saying.
I love that. No escape. No matter what I say, you cannot escape me. Yeah. I love that. But I'm glad, because I do feel like as women, we should put in boundaries and we should not feel bad about it.
Yeah,
I think that's the most important. I think that's the toughest thing. Yeah. But practice makes perfect. I think I've got to say that. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to start our this or that section. Okay. Because that's the most important section, obviously. So let's have a look at what we've got. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So just to let you know that some of them will be related to your podcast. Sure. And some of them will just be generally about life, and you can explain as much as you like. You don't have to. Okay, ready?
Okay.
Cool. Homebody or social butterfly?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Homebody by preference, social butterfly by demand.
I love that. I love it. I think I might use that somewhere else. Okay, library or bookstore?
Ooh. I mean, I want to say bookstore just because there tends to be a little bit more variety, but libraries are incredibly important and they are a dying species in our world. Yeah. And as a child, I used to visit the library with my mum, and it's one of my fondest memories. Yeah. But I find I'm often able to find more of what I need at a bookstore. So yeah.
I get that. Meet your favourite author or meet your favourite character?
Meet your favourite character.
I thought you would say that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that would be amazing.
Okay. Signed edition or first edition?
First edition. I think that's
really?
More special.
Okay.
Yeah. First edition.
Cool. Hoarder or deleter?
Oh, hoarder, unfortunately.
Oh no.
Very bad tendency.
I feel like I'm that as well, which is why I said oh no. Okay, last one. Hero or villain?
Hero.
Oh.
Hero. I still, although I'm trying to work on my people-pleasing tendency and setting boundaries, I still, I can't get quite behind the villain. Although I have to say that, we've been talking a lot about understanding somebody's past. It's also important to understand how a villain becomes a villain, and maybe that will change your mind. Maybe they're also a hero.
So true. But I think in the same way, I read this somewhere quite recently, that everyone's a villain in someone's story.
That's true. That's very true.
That kind of evens it out a bit. Okay, I've got a final question for you, apart from the normal things that we do at the end. If there was a book on your life, what would you like it to be called?
Oh, that's so nice. Oh, that's so hard. If there was a book on my life, I can't give you a full title, but I think I would like something in the title that reflects community, and that reflects kindness and empathy, and also hard work.
Okay.
Yeah, can't think of a full title, but yeah,
that's all right. Those are very important qualities. There you go. Samia, thank you so much. It's been wonderful talking to you, and I really appreciate you coming on as a guest. Last of all, where do we find you on your socials? So you can find the Diverse Bookshelf podcast on Instagram, the Diverse Bookshelf pod. Also Read with Samia on Instagram, where I share book reviews and stuff. I only really use Instagram. Okay. Not a TikTok girly. And obviously your podcast is on all major podcasting platforms. So
that's right.
Check it out. There are some great conversations going on there. Is there anything else you would like to say?
No, but thank you. This has been so great.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been lovely having you on.
You guys are doing a great job with the pod.
Thank you. See, we have podcast love. So I just want to say a big thank you to DJ Shy Guy, who created our jingle, because I always forget that, so I remembered it this time. And also you can catch us on Voice Out Podcast on Instagram. We are also not very active on other socials, so I'm not going to mention them, but you can find us if you just search the name of the podcast. And again, we are also on all major podcasting platforms. And remember, we don't want to keep it in, we want to voice it out. Bye.